Hello YouTube, this is Morgan Airspeed Prime here with my next Avatar review. This is going to be my review, my thoughts on this new release here, which is the Kyoshi Novels Box Set. So I hesitated for a while about if I was actually going to get this or not. And I think what's interesting about this, and that's why I felt the need to put this in sort of like the thumbnail and the title, is to make it clear that there is actually new content included here. All of the marketing material on this re-release made it seem like it was literally just a re-release. It was just the two original books in a box. But then I get this and I look at it, and what does it say right there on the spine? Includes exclusive never before seen content. On the bottom of it, it describes it in a little bit more detail there. This special edition box set includes never before seen cut scenes with author commentary. So really, really cool. And this is not, I had a look earlier on, not on the Abrams Books website, that is a thing, not on any listing that I've seen, and maybe I missed something where this news actually did like sneak out, but for sure the majority of people who are aware that this box set was a thing that was coming out had no clue that it was anything other than the two books in a box. And I was prepared to do the video anyway on that, just because, you know, I think people wanted to see what it was like people who haven't got a physical copy of these books yet. What was it like? Is there anything different at all? Is the kind of box as plain as it maybe looked in the one image that we got? And I think I'm much more impressed with this actually having it in hand here. So let's just take a look. So the front, you can see here, clean Rise of Kyoshi cover. Back, clean Shadow of Kyoshi cover. The spine, like I already showed you, the Kyoshi Novels has the two books there. Says the new content, FCE, and a Kyoshi image. Really, really nice. The top, you can see here, Discover the Untold Story, has the two kind of covers there, and again, includes never before seen content. And then the bottom, like I said, also has a similar description. But why isn't this description the one on like the website or the one on Amazon or anything like that? Why is this only on the final product, and why do they still not have like an official thing? I get it, the release is actually tomorrow, so I actually have this a day early, but it's just really, really interesting that they did that. The other thing I'd say about this is that the box is actually quite nice. You can see there it's kind of thick, like it's a pretty rigid box. It's not just a kind of really low quality, just like paper kind of slipcase type thing. No, it's a proper like rigid box, to the point where like the books are kind of almost a little tricky to actually get out because they're in there so tight, and like the sides don't really flex. Just looking at the box, like there's a little bit of flex of course, but it's solid. It is really, really solid and nice. You can see the sort of shine off it as well. So, you know, actually pleasantly surprised here, to the point where like there was that recent announcement of the Ultimate Edition Avatar and Korra Blu-ray, where it's going to be the two previous releases in a box with some extra content. I hope the box is like this instead of just, you know, a little bit of paper. So yeah, pretty nice here if you want to know about the box. And again, it does have both covers clean, so that's nice. Then what you actually get inside. It is, in fact, just the two books, but in the middle is a little booklet with extra content, which we'll get to. Very briefly on the books themselves. As far as I can tell, they are pretty much identical to the first edition books that I have. The only way I can in any way tell that they're like in any way different is just that the binding on them is slightly different, just highlighting that I guess it's a different print run of the book, which would make sense in that like the Rise of Kyoshi is like nearly 2 years old at this point. Or like is 2 years old, I guess. The Shadow of Kyoshi is like a year-old book at this point. This re-release, I guess, does have, you know, second, third run printings of the books in it. So other than that, like there's nothing extra. These are not the like Barnes and Noble's like exclusive edition where you get the extra art pieces and the map and stuff like that. You don't get them in this. These are exactly the same as these. Like I said, the only real difference is probably with the Shadow of Kyoshi. You can maybe just about sort of tell that one of them slightly like thicker than the other. That's just because I think the copy for the box has like a slightly tighter binding, but that's really the only difference I think in general across the two of them. Otherwise it's exactly the same in that, you know, it is a kind of slipcase over the kind of red and gold kind of plain cover. Nothing else different at all. The pages aren't differently ordered or anything like that. I think it has a different number for like the printing, which would make sense, but otherwise exactly the same. Exactly the same. But you know, that's completely fine. It is a fundamentally at its core a re-release product, so you expect the books to be pretty much the same. So other than that, like the quality of the stuff here is nice. The pricing is interesting in that it's like, what does it say here? US $37.99, and that compares to say one of the books, which is what, $18.99 each. So technically at full retail price, there isn't really a difference. You are fundamentally getting the two books and buying two books, and the extra stuff and the box is sort of the free content. But of course, you're never going to be paying full retail price because the books are always that little bit cheaper. And even myself, I think I only paid maybe like, I think it was like 23 or 24 euro for this box set, so sort of like 12 each for the books, and the extra content to me was a bonus because no one knew that there was the bonus content included in this re-release because none of the marketing material had it. So let's get into this. This is what it is. So you can see here the Kyoshi Novels FCE exclusive cut scene with author commentary inside. Really nice though. Here you do get the sort of map. Like if we open up the sort of cover here, you do get the sort of Kyoshi map. It's pretty similar, just with a more green color scheme to the map from the calendar. So that's kind of nice. And then yeah, it's like, well, what does it say? I think it even says it here. It's like a 16-page scene with commentary from FCE about sort of why the scene was cut, the moments where you can see that it's not like a finalized chapter, and the stuff that he would change or feedback he got from Mike and Brian. The inside cover is just basically sort of the background for the main kind of Shadow of Kyoshi image you can sort of see there. Just the sort of mountain stuff in the background. But other than that, it's, as you can see here, the bold is FCE commentary, and then the rest of it is just sort of normal text like you get from a book. So effectively, it's one extra chapter with creator commentary. Now, where the chapter is set, it's from the Shadow of Kyoshi. It's set basically immediately after Yoon has put the salt in the plants to spell out the message that, you know, the wrong leader is in charge of they have the wrong Fire Lord, basically, that you know, Zoryu's brother should actually be the Fire Lord, that sort of thing, that big moment. This is sort of what happens immediately following that in this version of it. The scene that was planned to follow it, but then it was obviously changed. The way I interpret this is definitely that canonically it's not necessarily that this is sort of meant to happen, but that like maybe aspects of this you can maybe see as canon. But basically it's just that, you know, we get across the idea of Kyoshi quickly trying to like you know, use her earthbending to get rid of that message so that it's not there anymore. And interesting with regards to that, he says here Kyoshi is hiding the inflammatory message about the rightful Fire Lord in the plant so no one sees them. What a waste of drama. So he's even reflecting on it and being like, spelling that out in the story that Kyoshi actually gets rid of the message like shortly after it's revealed. It takes away some of the drama, and that's actually more, I suppose, intense, interesting that it's potentially such a big message that it's not feasible for Kyoshi to actually get rid of it. And then it's basically playing on more of the idea of the tensions between the different clans. So you have like Lady Huazo here kind of leading her clan, and then the Kyosos of course come in as well, and it's it's a really fun little scene here where they get into basically one of the traditions of this specific location, where it's this it's called like they're making the sticky mountains. And the idea is that they make pyramids out of like wood, I guess, and stuff like that. And then the tradition is to cover them with cooked glutinous rice. Glutinous rice? Glutinous? I guess that's it. The village divides into teams and sends young people to climb the mountains and grab the flag at the top. And the idea here is that typically when the crops and the food production is high, this sort of waste of food for this kind of like fun festival game is fine. But obviously the idea of the reign of Zoryu is that things aren't going so well. So this is like a pretty bad waste of food here. And so it's this, there's a little bit more tension behind this game going in this time because of the sense of like, the tension is rising between who from what clan should be on the throne. And the idea is also that typically in this game, the game doesn't end until the three flags are got. And like typical Fire Nation thing, there's always that edge of, and it can get pretty violent. Bones can be broken here, broken noses, that sort of thing. There's a bit of, you're allowed to sort of fight your way past other people to get to the top. There's not a lot of rules going on here in this thing. And again, it's like kind of this really messy kind of game and so on. He actually says that, I was inspired here by Hong Kong's Chung Chau Bun Festival. You climb up a tower of buns and snatch the highest ones you can for luck. And yeah, there's some fun other things. Like he makes a comment here about just before Kyoshi sort of gets involved in what's going on here, Rangi comes over and gives food to Kyoshi, highlighting that idea that Rangi is very concerned about the fact that Kyoshi isn't eating all that well. She's more focused on other things, and she's not focusing on eating as much as she should. And he says here, I ramped up Rangi giving Kyoshi food after a night of meditation to 11 in the final draft. Conflict-wise and emotion-wise, I hope seeing how dull that moment started out doesn't ruin the better version for anyone, of course. And I think that's kind of an interesting one in that, like, he reflects on this scene and sees the idea that Rangi typically just brings a bit of food to Kyoshi in most scenes, I guess. He sees that as being taking away from the big scene where an angry Rangi, even though she's very frustrated about what Kyoshi has done, still rushes in to give Kyoshi food and then storms out. That's still a cool scene, but I like the idea that Rangi was always like giving Kyoshi food in this more normal version of it. I don't think it takes away. And that's what's kind of interesting here, in that there's a bunch of these moments that he kind of goes through where I'm kind of like, okay, yeah, I can see that. But then there's other ones where I'm actually like, no, I think you could have altered this scene slightly and kept it in the book. Whereas like he's all for like, no, the editors made the right choice removing this scene from the book. And I'm kind of like, I actually think this is pretty fun in here. Just, I get it, like it's just before all of the heavy action kicks off and we get into that sort of like rush to the end that happens in the Shadow of Kyoshi. So I find it very weird that in a book that is 100 pages shorter than the previous book, and one of the major criticisms I have with the Shadow of Kyoshi is that it feels like it's missing scenes or jumps past moments for really clear-cut, kind of important scenes to happen. They're cutting out scenes where you're world building, you're developing the different clans more. And so this moment of effectively Kyoshi participating in this event as her own team, solo team, just to basically, I'll win it so that the two clans don't kill each other. And instead they're more sort of like, fighting to take me out in the middle of it all. Like she does this to prevent like this game, which is typically fun, from becoming a bit of a massacre. So I think that's actually a really fun thing that, like, again, it adds to it. Yes, it's a little bit of a side story type thing, but I'd almost say that part of the flaw of the Shadow of Kyoshi is that it's maybe missing a few scenes like this. So it's interesting to consider. So there's that. The other thing that happens here is, of course, Lady Wazo's here, of course, being her usual self. The the Sansure Kyoso comes in and they want in on this. So it's pretty cool. And initially, again, it's this situation where, again, Kyoshi is sort of being used by the people of the Fire Nation for political gain. They're trying to be like, oh, the Avatar is going to be on our team in the middle of this, like that she's taking a side in this conflict. And Kyoshi's like, no, I have no involvement here. So Kyoshi's like, I'll participate, but on my own team by myself. And then they're kind of like, well, it's a Fire Nation thing. You sort of have to have like some sort of a symbol to designate your team, even though it's just you. And this is, I think, a fantastic moment. And this is where, like, I wish that almost this chapter was in the book just for this moment. She basically is just like, oh, I think I know what symbol I want. And then she looks over to Heiran and Rangi, and it's kind of like, can I? And they're like, oh, yeah, sure, yeah, absolutely. And she participates under the Seinaka symbol. And it's this moment of, like, Kyoshi, like, really officially becoming sort of part of the Seinaka clan, that she's part of Rangi and Heiran's family. Really, really cool. And Heiran even says, you know what this means, though? You're ours now. Therefore, you cannot lose. Our clan does not tolerate losing. And interestingly, his comment to this fantastic scene, where I think if huge fans of Kyoshi Rangi, the book, read this scene, and then they saw this comment from him, it's like, Kyoshi finding a family is a major theme across both books. While this might be funny, the final version hammers it home much better, and I'm kind of like, I like the scene that's in the book that sort of relates to this, but I like this as well. I don't think you have to have it just be this, like, kind of more emotional moment where it's clear that they're part of the family, but then I like this fun moment where she actually more publicly shows that she's aligned more with the Seinaka clan, who aren't overly involved in the kind of political affairs of everything going on here. It's kind of cool, and she's like, I won't disappoint you. Like, Kyoshi puts more pressure on herself by going as a Seinaka because they're elite, you know, they're meant to be good at this sort of stuff. So I like that. And like, there's a fun moment from Nyata when he hears about what's going on. He comes over and he's like, I want you to know that this is the most Karuk move you could have possibly pulled. And again, this is at a point in the story where she's not exactly, like, up for being compared to Karuk just yet. And so her joining as a solo team to try and win this competition is a very, like, Karuk test of strength type thing, and I really like that, and Kyoshi's frustrated by this. And then we get the whole, like, action set piece where she, like, goes through, like, her plan in this. And look, I get it, it's not the most incredible action scene because it's just this mass, like, swell of people rushing towards these three pyramids that have flags on top of them, and it's kind of messy and so on, and you just get the idea that, like, she has to adapt to how sort of slippery it is trying to crawl up, like slippy rice, I guess, on the way up. But she gets the first one. You know, she fights her way past all the people to get the second one. But then the third one, like, they've sort of, everyone else realizes that they sort of lost to Kyoshi with the first two, so they're going to make sure they get the third one. And she effectively, I think what happens here is she, like, topples over the other two pyramids because they're done. She has those flags, and she's, like, on top of the second one as it falls over towards the third one, and that's how she gets the sort of boost over the top of them. Like, she just, like, as it's falling over, she jumps and grabs the last one, and it's like, okay, pretty cool. And you can see, like, he mentions, like, the action in this scene got reused when Kyoshi and Jinpa are breaking up the brawl between rival clans. There's no such thing as wasted writing. He also says, in a moment where, I think how she gets the second flag is that she actually, like, rushes over to the mass of people trying to get there, and basically hops across people's heads. He even says here, it's a reference to the Suki running across people's heads thing. And then he compares it to the idea of she has to use sort of dust stepping form, and this is a more solid form of dust stepping. And he was going to, in the book, if this was in there, really link the idea of sort of the Kyoshi warriors and having that agility to sort of run across people's heads is related to the technique that you would need to do dust stepping, to have very light footwork. Kind of cool reference there. I kind of like it. And he does note, though, at the end, though, that part of the reason why I suppose he's not overly happy with this is because, yeah, it's not going to work as well for her as it does for Suki. Because she ends up actually using it, like, pretty well. But the idea is that Kyoshi is this giant of a character. And even though I guess it's a lot of, like, kind of men and, you know, it's sort of the best of both clans going for this, the idea that people would just let her step across their heads and that it would be as successful for her doesn't quite work. So I get sort of some of the criticisms that he kind of levels at the scene as well. And he says here, you know, pacing is subjective, but if you like it to be as tight as possible, you can see it starting to fray around the edges. Kyoshi's goal hasn't changed, so all I'm doing is describing a continuation and not a turn or a pivot or a conflict or a build-up of tension. All of which would feel more satisfying to read, in my opinion. And he says that basically about the transition as they go from Kyoshi has 2 flags going into the 3rd flag and realizing it's going to be the hardest one to get. And I sort of get what he's saying here, where like this action scene is not the be-all end-all. You don't have to sort of really have this big transition into like, and here's the build-up for the 3rd flag. No, just do the 3rd flag. We know what we're up to here in this scene. So, you know, again, this is before it underwent some last revisions. The final thing to say is just that towards the end, she just notes that she's having fun. She's enjoying being a part of this because while she does ultimately have this goal of sort of winning to avoid either clan winning, creating some sort of an issue, and riots basically happening, that instead they're sort of more annoyed at her for winning than they are annoyed at either side for winning. She's actually having fun because she's not used to typically succeeding so much like this and just being able to on her own show her, you know, raw physical skill here, a lot of her talents. She's not allowed to bend during all of this, so it's just her pure physical skill here getting this done. And he notes, I do regret not showing Kyoshi having more fun enjoying the books, but hey, she finds her moments. And he just notes again, when she topples over the pyramid, Kyoshi is heroically strong, but the description of the physics here was probably overdoing it. So, you know, there's that. And then the final thing he says, he's like, well, there you have it. If it feels clumsy, that's because revision is truly the magic that makes writing work. I'm sure the language isn't polished, though major themes are present. The Avatar learning her own power, dealing with factionalism and adapting to cultural nuances. But the scene lacked connection to the overall narrative and couldn't justify the 16 or so pages it took up. Plus, geez, Kyoshi, it's their holiday. You could be less judgmental. Different cuts like these have been made in service of the story, and when that happens, the essentials that are lost must be picked back up by harder-hitting scenes. Mike and my editors have helped me make these decisions with greater confidence, and for that, I will be forever grateful. So, it's an interesting one. I actually really like the scene, and I don't necessarily fully agree with the idea that this scene was, you know, why it was cut. And one of the other ones he says earlier on that I didn't read out was Mike gave me a crucial piece of advice on this scene. When a game is just a game without larger relevance to the greater story, the stakes can only ever be so high. I couldn't link what you're reading to the deeper plot very well, which led me to eventually cut it. But like I was saying earlier on, then the end criticism that is probably my only clear-cut, you know, major criticism across both Kyoshi novels is just that come, I'd say, about the halfway to sort of 5/8 mark through Shadow of Kyoshi, it feels like the last section is very much rushed, and all this nuanced building up of these different groups of characters and stuff like that. You, I think, needed a scene like this, another scene between the clans to get across just the dynamic, more of the culture of the Fire Nation, and I think a scene like that of a game thing that goes on during this festival is actually a really good way to do it. So I actually don't really agree necessarily with the idea of cutting it out just because it doesn't have a relevance to the overall plot as such, because sometimes, you know, just time with the characters is worth its weight in gold. That this scene is developing what's going on in the background, and that world building of the clans helps Kyoshi to better understand the situation going on here. You are establishing more of her connection with, you know, to the Seinaka clan with that nice scene, and it's character moment for her, having a little bit of fun here, getting to really shine in front of everyone without just using her bending, and it's just I can see some of what you're talking about. Like, definitely, it probably could go under like a revision or two to, you know, fix a few little things. But the core of the scene, I think I would have liked it. Like, justifying the 16 pages, I don't know. Like, again, the book's 100 pages shorter than the previous book. Like, would 16 extra pages in the middle have changed all that much? I don't know. Especially when I don't think we've ever really gotten a reason for why the second book was that much shorter than the other one. So I actually think this is really cool, this little booklet here. Again, I didn't read out like every single scene here and so on. I mainly just went through the sort of you know, a brief description of what was going on here, and then what the kind of comments from FCE were. You can see that they're pretty nicely kind of put in here in line with sort of the design aesthetic of the books, of just like this line of text, this description relates to this scene up here, you know, that sort of thing. Pretty cool. So I definitely like it. So I definitely would say, like, if you don't have physical copies of the Kyoshi novels, this box set is, I think, definitely the way to go. That way you just get the two books in one, plus that little bonus extra. This is a really nice way to hold the two books very nicely. As I said, the quality on this is quite nice, quite rigid. You get both books. They are just the standard hardcover releases, but it's good, it's solid. And then the surprise for me, that extra content of that little booklet is really, really nice. I think the only criticism I'd have about it is just, this would have been like the ultimate Kyoshi set if the hardcover editions they included also included all the art extras, like with the images of like Yoon and stuff like that. The map, I think, the more detailed map, I think that was in the first book. And that sort of extra Barnes & Noble's content from those editions of the books. But I get it, there's probably some exclusive deal where maybe they can't reprint that now, they might be able to reprint it later, who really knows. But again, if you're waiting for reprints, the paperbacks aren't out until 2024, so you either go for the original hardcover or you get this box set. And I think this box set now has a good enough reason for you to go out of your way to get it, because the box is nice, is actually really nice, and the booklet is really cool for some insight. Like, I'd love this sort of content for some of the other stuff as well, like cutscenes from the comics. That would be cool. But yeah, there is my review for the Kyoshi Novel Box Set. If you have any questions or comments, definitely leave them below. But other than that, that has been the video. Thanks for watching, and bye.